Hello and welcome to The Hill here on NewsNation. Live look at Capitol Hill right now as it seems like the House Speaker all but ended the hopes for a potential bipartisan border deal earlier today. We'll show you the letter that Mike Johnson fired off to his fellow Republicans. Coming up, we'll also speak with Los Angeles Dodgers legend Steve Garvey about what he thinks needs to happen. Why, you might ask? It's because he's potentially going to be the first Republican in California in some 20 years to win statewide office. We'll talk to him about all that. Plus, Mick's Picks, who Mick Mulvaney now has on his list of potential running mates for Donald Trump. Chris Steyerwalt also breaks down potential warning signs for President Biden and why lawmakers in Missouri are trying to prove a point by potentially allowing each other to participate in a duel. Thanks for being with us here on The Hill. I'm Blake Berman, joined today by the aforementioned Chris Steyerwalt, NewsNation political editor and senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. Chris Hahn is a former aide to Senator Chuck Schumer and a NewsNation political contributor. Kelly Meyer, of course, NewsNation Washington correspondent. Ford O'Connell, former Trump White House campaign surrogate. And Mick Mulvaney, former Trump White House chief of staff, NewsNation contributor as well. The Hill on NewsNation starts right now. Come on in. Thanks for being with us here on The Hill on NewsNation. We start in New York today, where a verdict has been reached in the defamation case against the former president, Donald Trump. Now, after less than 3 hours of deliberation, a jury decided Trump must pay $83.3 million to writer E. Jean Carroll for defaming her in 2019 when he denied her allegations of sexual abuse. $65 million of that will come in the form of punitive damages. Trump taking to Truth Social immediately, calling the decision, quote, absolutely ridiculous, and promising to appeal it. Hello to you all. Thanks for being with us here on The Hill. This broke moments ago, a little while ago, here on this Friday afternoon. Chris, Mick, I want to start with you both. Donald Trump is basically saying this is a continuation of Joe Biden's Justice Department trying to go after him, and now he's saying the Republican Party as well. What do you make of it?
Well, I don't think that anybody is surprised by this, and I don't think that this will probably affect a single vote in the general election in this sense, which is Donald Trump was found pretty conclusively to have provided hush money to a sex worker with whom he enjoyed an assignation while his wife was convalescing from the birth of their child. If the Stormy Daniels imbroglio did not make you say, I don't know if Donald Trump is up to scratch for the character to be president, I highly doubt that this is going to move anybody. It's an intensifier, but I don't think it's going to persuade anybody.
Mick?
Yeah, Chris is right. Keep in mind, this is the second piece of the E. Jean Carroll trial. The first piece was where Trump was already found civilly liable for sexually assaulting her. So it just goes right along with what just Chris said. If you're not moved by the first two things, Stormy Daniels or the sexual assault, are you really going to be moved by a large judgment? I don't think so.
Gosh, you mentioned Stormy Daniels. That seems like a lifetime ago when you just said that. Here was Donald Trump on Truth Social saying, quote, absolutely ridiculous. I fully disagree with both verdicts and will be appealing the whole Biden-directed witch hunt focused on me and the Republican Party. Our legal system, he says, is out of control and being used as a political weapon. They have taken away all our First Amendment rights. This is not America. Ford?
Well, he has a good point here. Reid Hoffman, the Democratic mega donor, actually bankrolled the legal team for Carroll. And not only that, 83.3 in punitive damages is going to be appealed. That seems extremely excessive. And when you look at the sort of 4 criminal cases against him and the 2 civil cases, 4 criminal cases are to hurt him politically.
Are they going after the Republican Party? I mean, Trump's now making the case.
He's a billionaire. But he is the Republican presidential nominee. They knew that going into it. But remember, these 2 civil cases are there to try to break him financially. He does believe that there's a rigged judicial system, and I think this is the case.
He claims to be a billionaire. You got to deter him. More importantly, the reason why he stopped the GOP from naming him the presumptive nominee is it would have triggered fundraising issues for him in paying this verdict and paying other legal fees. There would have been tighter controls on the money he raised. He doesn't want to be the presumptive nominee until July.
And I was just checking my emails, waiting to see if he is starting to fundraise off of this. He just had another Truth Social saying, quote, "There is no longer justice in America. Our judicial system is broken and unfair." So he's going to continue saying
I'll
that.
tell you, you mentioned checking emails, and here's why I'm digging in, Kelly, because Nikki Haley just sent out an email. Donald Trump's unhinged week, and it goes through a list of things.
Yeah.
It doesn't mention any of this. Because Nikki Haley's staying away from this. They
planned that email an hour ago.
There is a reason for that, because in the Republican primary, there is this narrative that there is a two-tier justice system, and if she starts attacking that, she's going to lose even more people.
Smart for her to stay away here? Or?
Well, you don't want to be on Joe Biden's side, which is basically the choice that Donald Trump is presenting here, which is either you're with me no matter what, or you're with Joe Biden. And Nikki Haley, Nikki Haley has a choice to make, which is how willing is she to upset half of the Republican Party or 2/3 of the Republican Party in order to get up Donald Trump's nose. Her need right now is to get Trump to keep doing goofy things like that motion to name him the presumptive nominee, right, or other stuff. She needs him to fight her, but she doesn't want to fight him around the question of whether Joe Biden is is right or wrong here.
All right, joining us now to discuss is Steve Garvey. You might know the name.
Yeah.
He's a former Los Angeles Dodgers World Series champion. Also, now jumping into the world of politics, Republican Senate candidate in the state of California. Steve Garvey, thank you for being with us here on the Hill on News Nation. Appreciate it. So let's actually show the poll Yeah, of course. I want to show the poll real quick because California Senate primary race right now, you are actually polling second as a Republican. So folks know you as a Los Angeles Dodgers legend, but you could be the next senator from the state of California. That primary comes on March 5th. Same date as the Republican primary, Steve. You going to be voting for Donald Trump or Nikki Haley?
That sounds like what my Democratic opponents were hitting at me on the other night in our first debate. Arguably,
it's
I'm running for the
relevant.
most difficult seat in America. Well, I said over the airways many, many times. I voted for the former president twice for obvious reasons. The first time, his opponent looked down at the people, called them deplorables, and I think any true American wouldn't have voted for her. The second time, the man was in the basement most of the time. When he came out, it was in a fixed environment with fixed questions. And as I always said, I wouldn't have voted for President Reagan if he had done that. So, I'm somebody that holds the currency of the ability to vote as something that I cherish. I'll make my decision. I'll go forward. But he's not on my ballot against Mr. Schiff and Ms. Porter and Lee. And arguably, I'm running for the most difficult seat in America, being a conservative. But the people are standing up. I talk to them throughout the state. I've been from the border to the farming and ranching areas.
And I want to get to you about
I
want to get to you about the border, and we're going to talk about that because it's obviously a huge issue. But I'm just wondering, for Republicans in that state and for voters, why you just won't say if you're voting for Trump or Haley at this point in time.
Oh, again, because it's a personal choice, and I've always taken it personally.
Okay.
I voted for Republicans and Democrats over the years, and I'm sticking to that wonderful currency of privacy of a vote.
Okay. Donald Trump, Mike Johnson, you just mentioned the border. We heard here in Washington today the House Speaker essentially say the border deal that's being negotiated by a partisan group of senators and the White House is dead on arrival. This all seemingly picked up speed, Steve, as you know, once Donald Trump said all or nothing. Do you have an issue with what Donald Trump and Mike Johnson have done in the last few days?
Well, what I would do is I'd close the border. I'd take a deep breath. We have a process that immigrants can start in their country, and that process can take them to the United States and then a pathway to becoming citizens. I think now we have to really focus on the real existential problems, and that's fentanyl and drugs. It's human trafficking. I'm about law and order. Let's get back to making things legal. They're illegal immigrants. They should be vetted again. And I think once we do that, we're going to take a huge step to getting back to 4 years ago when only 1,000 immigrants were coming across the border instead of 10 to thousands now.
What do you mean by shut the border? What does that look like?
Well, let's just shut it down. I mean, I think that so many people are coming across illegally.
No commerce, like shut all commerce down? That's what I'm curious about what shut it down means.
Well, I think the legal pathways of commerce can come across, but I also think that illegal immigrants must be stopped from coming in. We had a pretty good program with Mexico at one time. Let's try to renew that. But like I said before, I'm for law and order, and right now, and I've been to the border. I was down in San Diego at the corner of Tijuana and San Diego. I saw the wall go 300 to 400 yards out to the water, immigrants trying to come across, the U.S. Border Patrol telling us they're stretched and stranded every day. Let's reinvest in the people that are protecting our country, and that's our U.S. Border Patrol. Close down the border, and let's get law and order back again.
Poll in your state recently, are U.S. borders secure in preventing people from entering the country illegally? 62% in California say at this point in time, not secure. Steve Garvey, we got to leave it there. Thank you again for being here on the Hill. We appreciate it.
Let's do it again. Thank you.
Yep. All right. Have a good one. Meantime, the South Dakota governor, Kristi Noem, South Dakota governor, is at the southern border today and aligning herself with former President Trump by responding to Trump's calls and sending her state's National Guard to the Texas border. Now, Noem has widely been viewed as a potential pick for Donald Trump's vice president, if it gets to that point. Mick, come on in, because you have a short list of potential candidates that you think could get the job. Mick's picks, we're calling this. Let's show it. You think this is branding. You think this is down to 4. Kristi Noem, the aforementioned, Ben Carson, Elise Stefanik, and Tim Scott. Talk to me.
Yeah, that list is longer than it was last week. You know, Blake, the last couple of weeks I've been on the show talking about folks who might be on the vice presidential list. I always said that Tim Scott would be off the list. But his move last week to endorse Trump before the South Carolina primary really got my attention. As I mentioned before, I talked to Tim. He told me why he did that. But again, he had the perfect excuse to stay neutral in that race until after South Carolina. Nikki Haley, after all, literally gave him a Senate seat. So this is an affirmative move on his part, and I think you have to sort of put him back on the list. Again, look at that list. There's no white males. There's 2 women and 2 African-American males. I think the president is looking to sort of broaden his appeal. I still think Kristi Noem, high on the list. She certainly thinks she's high on the list. That's why she's in Texas right now. Elise Stefanik has had a good couple of weeks, but Ben Carson's still sort of my favorite pick because he's the lowest profile, and that's what I think Trump is going to like at the end of the day.
So let's show that graphic again one more time, because you might look at that graphic and say, well, wait a minute, someone's missing. And that someone would be Nikki Haley.
Yeah, I'll be curious to hear what Steirold has to say about this, but the longer this thing goes. Look, this is South Carolina. I mean, the screen behind me says Charlotte, North Carolina. We're in South Carolina, and politics is a blood sport in this state, right? This is going to get really nasty if it goes the next 4 weeks. And while Donald Trump will always forgive, he never forgets. And if this goes on 2 or 3 or 4 more weeks, it's going to be really nasty and hard for her to come back from that.
Her viability as a running mate depends on whether she poses a serious threat, right? So we haven't had any good polling yet on the state of the race, and we're waiting, and when we see some numbers come in. But look, if Nikki Haley has a real voter block and she's there, then she can make herself heard. If she's, 1 in 10 Republicans are supporting Nikki Haley or something, then Trump can dismiss her.
All right, around the table real quick. Do you have any objection with what Mick said?
My problem with the entire list is none of them deliver anything for Trump that he doesn't.
All right, welcome back here to the Hill on NewsNation. It's like 70 degrees here in Washington today. That might have fried the wires there for a second. But we're back. I wanted to go around the table real quick just to get your reactions to Mick Mulvaney on that VP.
I disagree. I think he needs somebody from a swing state like Wisconsin, or maybe Glenn Youngkin from Virginia, Ron Johnson from Wisconsin, which I know everybody disagrees with me on. But it's got to be somebody who could help get him some votes in a place he needs to win.
Kelly?
I definitely was thinking Noem, and to see her back in the news this week, that's really interesting as we're seeing a flow of different people coming out. And I talked to Tim Scott this week and asked him if this was a VP audition as he was holding babies up at polling places. And he said, no, I just want us to win. So we'll see.
He said, I'm holding a baby up at a polling place. What do you think?
Babies.
Tim Scott is certainly auditioning for it, but the magnificent Mulvaney's close. It's going to be a woman, and it's going to be a younger woman. I agree with Steirold off the air. Katie Britt of Alabama might also be in there as well, because she helps deliver Trump what he needs in terms of an image and a profile.
And I'll tell you people something. Get ready, because we're going to have months and months of this.
Yes.
Mixed picks are going to go deep because Trump is going to get to dangle this until July.
Nobody votes for vice president unless that vice president is from your state.
To that point, Mick, you don't think he's actually made up his mind for that very reason that Chris has said, right?
Oh, no, Steigerwald's absolutely right about this. This whole thing about that he's already made up his mind, no chance. He will milk this as long as he possibly can because it's great for ratings.
It's going to be The Apprentice in real time.
Celebrity Apprentice.
All right. Meantime, other side of the aisle, President Biden is now sending 2 top aides to Delaware to oversee his re-election effort. But as we end the week, are there fresh warning signs for the president? Steigerwald here to break it all down. Chris?
You know how you say what caught your eye? Mm-hmm. Well, did you see this? Mm-hmm. So did you see these headlines? Maybe you saw these headlines about how bad Joe Biden's third-year numbers were in Gallup polling. It's the lowest. It's the worst. It's an ominous sign. It's a disaster. I don't know whether you've heard it, but it's very terrible. Okay. Look at these numbers. Here are the third-year approval numbers. And it is true that Joe Biden has the worst third-year job approval rating of any president since Jimmy Carter. But you know who had the lowest approval rating in his third year since Jimmy Carter? Donald Trump. And you know who had the lowest third-year approval rating since Jimmy Carter before that? Barack Obama. Seems like there's a trend going on here, and we could talk about how lunatic polarization and the insane partisan siloing of this great nation into warring camps makes it very hard for presidents to have good approval ratings. The last time we had an approval rating for president with approval rating in the 60s was Barack Obama for about 5 minutes after he got elected. That used to be common. Approval ratings in the 60s used to be common. But that's how he really stacks up. But here's what matters. Is he going to win re-election or not? That's what you care. That's what everybody wants to know. Will Joe Biden get re-elected? Look at the and those who lost. What kind of strong correlation do you see between third-year approval ratings and re-election? Looks like none. Looks like basically almost no correlation between those things. George H.W. Bush was walking on water in his third year. It was tremendous. He had won the Cold War. He was defeated Saddam Hussein. He was not going to do it. And then what happened? On the other hand, you see over on the other side, Ronald Reagan, Barack Obama, very low numbers, relatively speaking. Reagan went on to the biggest win in modern electoral history. Okay, what makes the difference? Here's your next graphic. Thanks to Caleb and company. Here's your next graphic. The things that matter are: how is the economy in the second quarter of the year? Joe Biden just got a very nice number for the last quarter. It was a 3.3% growth rate in the economy in the last quarter of his third year. That's good. Nice. But what really matters is the economy growing or shrinking? And do voters feel that in the second quarter of the year? Look at the down red arrows. What do those down red arrows in the right column in the second quarter GDP, what do they have in common? They lose, right? They lose. Jimmy Carter, the economy is contracting. George W. Bush got away with it barely. It was only 1 point. He skated. Yeah, there were war issues. There was all of that stuff. And Donald Trump had the worst. It was 33 points. The economy was contracting because of coronavirus, and he lost. Okay, so what does matter? Here's 3 scenarios. Here's 3 stories that we could tell about Joe Biden, depending on how the economy is by the time we get to the end of June. There's the Jimmy Carter scenario. Low ratings now. The real recession kicks in, loses in a landslide. Boom. That's scenario 1. That could still happen to him. Second scenario is George H.W. Bush scenario. This aggression will not stand, man. He's doing really well because of the Iraq War and other things. But the economy goes into recession. The economy turns around. In this quarter, in his re-election year, the economy was actually getting better. The recession was over, but people weren't feeling it yet, and so he lost. And then there's Ross Perot, the giant sucking sound, right? He had a third-party candidate who made it bad for him. That's the danger for Biden. What Biden's looking for, he wants to do an Obama. Polarized numbers, keep his approval rating low, but he's beating those low expectations with modest economic growth in the second quarter, and then he turns the focus on his challenger, in that case Willard Mitt Romney, in this case it's Donald Trump, and says it's a choice election. You don't want this dude. It's good enough. So there you go.
Breaks it down.
Key point, choice election. Donald Trump will not allow this to be a referendum on Joe Biden. It will be a choice between Donald Trump and Joe Biden, and the people don't want the chaos of Donald Trump.
Disagree with you. As long as illegal immigration and inflation are the top two issues, which they are right now, Donald Trump will become the 47th president of the United States. And here's why. Prices are up 20%. When I look at groceries, it's 25%, electricity 24%. Those are not luxury items. Those are the essentials. And let me tell you something. Joe Biden could do a lot on the border, and he chooses not to.
There's a bill. There's a deal.
Hey, Mick, I want to ask you, former budget chief. So Chris's theory there and thesis, and you just heard that. What's the economic indicator then that you're going to be looking at in the summer of next year?
Inflation. There's no question. People don't understand what GDP is. Okay. They know whether or not they have a job, and then they know what stuff costs. So it's not GDP growth.
And that's exactly what happened to Bush. Right. So for George H.W. Bush, the recession was over and it was actually growing, but people were not feeling it yet. Yeah. Because who gets hit by inflation and a contracting economy first? Lower middle class voters. Who is the last to feel the recovery? Lower middle class and working class voters. Those are the people who are going to decide the election. And so what Biden needs, baby, he needs those good wins to keep just gusting along. Because we've seen, and if you look at, I know Kelly's always hanging out at the Pew Research Center. She's always reading what's in the Pew Research Center.
Aren't we all?
And the new economic trend numbers for Biden say if this can keep up, people are starting to be a little more optimistic if this can keep up. But the flip side of that is what? If it gets worse, then they're going to be disappointed.
Yeah. The question you said I like to ask, one of them is?
Yeah. What caught my eye?
Close.
What?
Did you see this?
Did you see this?
Pop it up. That is President Biden with the Minnesota Senator Amy Klobuchar and some union workers yesterday in Wisconsin. There he is having a beer, at least hanging out with some folks, having a beer, construction hard hat on backwards. What do you see there?
Well, we had a rule when I worked in the Senate. No singing, no dancing, no hats. Never put on a hat when you're running for office, ever.
You see the guy, you cover him. What do you see?
I didn't even recognize him there in the back, celebrating. I was actually going to add to this, just the whole third party thing. I just think that, like we were talking about Trump, Biden, I just am watching for more to happen in the end.
Here.
If Donald Trump wore a hard hat backwards, I'd never hear the end of it in the media. And that's the bottom line. Joe Biden should be crucified for doing that.
Oh, come on. Crucified? You don't believe that.
Wait.
I know you don't believe that.
I actually have worn a hard hat.
We know they're confusing the body. They look the same backwards.
On the other side, we've got to run a break, but on the other side of the break, Senator Mike Rounds, Republican from South Dakota, joins us. The Hill, back in a few. Some news out of Washington today as the House Speaker Mike Johnson gave a message to his Senate colleagues. The bill that's being negotiated by a bipartisan group of senators and the White House that ties border security to aid for Ukraine and Israel is dead on arrival in the House, he says, quote, in a letter to his colleagues. I am emphasizing again today that House Republicans will vigorously oppose any policy proposal from the White House or Senate that would further incentivize illegal aliens to break our laws, end quote. Now, the House Speaker also says his chamber will vote on articles of impeachment against the Department of Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas as soon as possible, potentially as early as next week. Now, the letter comes after Donald Trump posted, quote, a border deal now would be another gift to the radical left Democrats. They need it politically and don't care about our border. Chris, what about that from Donald Trump? What about that from the House Speaker?
Well, when the goal of politics is to break the system and make sure that the system doesn't work, you get frustrated voters. And then the frustrated voters vote for people who say they're going to come break the system more. And it just intensifies and intensifies. It's a baklava of disappointment and frustration. And, it's heartbreaking. Mitch McConnell took a lot of heat for saying to Senate Republicans, our dreams of doing our jobs are probably going to be dashed by Donald Trump's position. Took a lot of heat for that, but he was just telling the truth, right? The appetite for Senate Republicans to take a chance on this. And Obama did it to Marco Rubio long ago.
Yeah.
And we've
2013.
We've seen it happen again and again, which is if you're ambitious and you want to get ahead, you better not get caught doing your job well.
See, I reject the entire premise of the narrative of a border deal. Joe Biden created this crisis on his own, and he has the power through executive action to mitigate it. We have 3.5 million illegals coming in.
I hear Republicans saying, President Biden, take executive action.
And he did. Yeah. He did in 2010 and 2012. When there was an election for Obama, he started deporting people. And in the Senate deal, if they don't detain people, they don't deport people, and they don't have them sit in asylum in their home country in Mexico,
we've had a broken immigration system.
Mick, is this bad policy or bad politics or both?
Well, let's just look at the politics of it, because the policy of it is very, very deep and complicated. But Trump might be missing an opportunity here, because let's fast forward. Let's play chess for a second. Let's say he wins. Let's say a deal doesn't get done, and he wins. And they find out when he's in charge that he can't do much better, right? Maybe he could. Maybe his DHS person is certainly going to be better than Mayorkas. There's no question about that. But maybe things are so broken that they need legislation to fix it, and he might not be able to get that done. So might be better off. I think at least you could make the case that he's almost a little bit better off for them to do the deal now, so his fingerprints aren't all over it.
I got to disagree with the magnificent Mulvaney on this one. Joe Biden can quash 80% of this problem all by himself. Remember, under Trump, the worst we had was 850,000 people. Hold on.
So you're saying executive action. Mick, Democrats loved it when Donald Trump took executive actions, right? No, of course not. The other party always screams when the sitting president takes executive action.
But on the border is different. Barack Obama did it when he had to.
This is why we all hate Washington. Because there's a compromise to be had here. There are good people in Washington that want to make the compromise, and then there are some people that only care about the next election. And the problem with Washington is the next election is always less than 2 years away. This happened in 2013, as Chris pointed out. It's happening again now, and it's on the same issue. We haven't had real immigration policy in this country in a very long time. There's a market driving people here. We got to figure this out. Congress is making a good step here. They're providing the funds you need for the border.
Democrats have been
Where is the money? Where is the money? Where do you want me to take the money from to do the border? Part of this bill does that. Congress needs to do that. That's Congress's job.
Mulvaney, hand raised, and then I want to get to Senator Rounds. Mick?
Senator Rounds.
Yeah, real quickly, I'm just thinking back to the government shutdown back in 2019. We tried to do everything we possibly could, but we could not get enough money from the Congress. What makes people think that even if the Democrats are not in charge of the Senate, they're going to give us the money we need to do the border? I just see history repeating itself, and we did better on the border than Biden. There's no question about it. But I'm not sure we'd be able to fix it entirely without Congress going along, and I just don't see that happening under Trump.
Okay. All right, come on in, Republican Senator from the state of South Dakota, Mike Rounds, joining us live here on the Hill. Senator, Friday afternoon, 6:30 here on the East Coast. We appreciate you sticking around and joining us. You've been listening to some of that, I'm sure. Tom Tillis, your colleague, Republican, North Carolina, said it is, quote, it's reported that he said, quote, it is immoral for me to think that you look the other way because you think this is the linchpin for President Trump to win. Do you agree with your Republican colleague that what's going on is, quote unquote, immoral?
The discussion that you're talking about was taking place in our conference discussion, and it was a lot more civil than the discussion that you guys are having right now. But it was a lot of us talking about the path forward. And we really do believe that the security at the southern border is definitely broken. We understand that there's politics involved in it. But the bottom line is right now, before an election, with 302,000 people coming across the border in December, it's very clear that we need to do something. When we go back home and we talk to the folks back there, one of the first things they say is, what's wrong with you people?
You need
Why
to do
don't you
something?
fix this?
Yeah, I hear you, and I hear members of the Senate and the House all the time say they go back home, and those are the things that they hear. But if you say that we need to fix the border, are Donald Trump and the House Speaker in the wrong for saying that what's being negotiated is dead on arrival?
Look, if you listen to what the Speaker said, and I happen to, at least we've been told anyway, that he has had a number of discussions with folks that are in the negotiations. And look, I think the thing that we're supposed to do is to do the best job we can at addressing two major issues, parole and asylum. Those are both areas that if correctly addressed, we can reduce significantly the number of individuals that will ever even come to the border in the first place. And the cartels will not be able to tell them that if I can get you to the border, all you got to do is walk in and ask for a plane ticket to someplace in America and you'll get a court date 7 years later. So what we're trying to do is address the problem itself. It's also the same kind of stuff that the previous administration wanted to be able to utilize, because Title 42, which is what they used to stop a lot of it, can't be used right now because we're not in the middle of a pandemic. So we want to give the next administration these tools. At the same time, we had 302,000 people coming across in December. We can't put up 300,000 people during the entire 2024 time period and expect to be able to go home and say, we're really working hard at getting something done. We definitely want to make sure, look, we haven't seen the final recommendations, so we're going to hold our judgment until we actually see them. But I can just tell you this much, it would be a mistake on our part if we didn't do the best we could to fix this problem long-term for our country. So in this particular case, yeah, we're going to take a little bit of heat until such time as the American people actually get a chance to see what we're trying to get done. And then I'm prepared to, if I vote for it, I'll go home and defend it.
Okay. Speaking of voting, you have not endorsed Donald Trump yet. You ready to do that?
Not yet. Look, I thought that Tim Scott was the right guy for the job. I thought he was one of these guys that really brought back in that sense of trust, that sense of listening to other people, working together, bringing together a team. And I thought he'd be the right guy for the job. I told him the other day, I said, I'm really sorry, Tim, that you're not still in the race. But he was my choice on it, and there were a couple of us that felt that way on it. In the meantime, there's a long ways to go in this election process, and I can hold my powder dry. And besides that, I'm not sure anybody around the country really listens to exactly who the members of the United States Senate are recommending to them.
Fair enough. But let me ask you this. The governor from your state, Kristi Noem, being talked about as a potential vice presidential candidate for Donald Trump. You say folks don't listen to what, senators endorse or don't endorse, but you know Kristi Noem fairly well, Senator. Do you think she has what it takes to potentially be the next vice president of the United States?
It's not a matter of what I think. It's what does the presumptive nominee think? And in this particular case, we know there are two items that he deeply cares about. Number one, is that person going to be absolutely loyal to him, period? And number two, do they look the part? Would they make the casting screen? And you know what? She's got a lot going for her.
Okay, got to leave it there. Senator Rounds, again, we appreciate the time, sir. Have a great weekend, and we hope to talk to you soon.
All right, you bet.
Thanks. Yep. We interview lawmakers all the time on this show, as you know, and sometimes their objective is just to come here, spitfire, talking points, etc. I did not find that there. That was a fairly reasoned, refreshing interview. Yeah.
Mike Rounds, I got to say, whatever you think of his politics or his party, he's a peach. He's circumspect. There's some humility in the way that he talks. And obviously he was dodging your questions, but he was dodging them in a deferential, respectful way, taking it back to the voters. I like it when they wear neckties more. But more of that generally, please.
I did find it interesting, though, that he said, we're willing to take the heat now.
Yeah.
Right.
But let's see what a deal potentially does or does not look like.
Well, look, he says, if it's something I vote for, I'm going to defend it. And I think that they've got a defensible deal right now. I also think the American people want to see progress, not stagnation. So I think that, the senators are going to come up with a deal. I don't think it goes anywhere.
I like where his heart's at. My problem is I cannot trust President Biden and the Democrats in the Senate because they just went to the Supreme Court to undo border security in Texas. I'm sorry. They are not been serious about border security since 2006 and the
supremacy of the federal government in border security.
Do you remember Obamacare and John McCain's big thumbs down?
Yes, sir.
And do you remember how Republicans said we have to have total control of Congress and the presidency in order to deliver on our 9-year promise to defund to remove Obamacare and replace it? And then they got in and they didn't have a plan and it didn't happen. And we've watched it happen on the border. We've watched it happen on health insurance. We've watched it happen on a host of issues on which there is broad consensus in the United States. But these knuckleheads in Washington, as you said, the election's only ever 2 years away. So the desires of most we have a Congress, Mr. Berman, that is democratically elected but not representative, and that's a problem.
Yeah. And real quick, Kelly, you covered President Biden daily. That's what he's dealing with.
Yeah, I mean, I think they are hopefully inching closer to getting something done. I mean, I know we were talking about this for months now, or years now, really, but over the Christmas holiday, and they are getting closer. I think we heard from Karine Jean-Pierre at the podium today. They want to get there.
Will Mike Johnson and Donald Trump allow?
Exactly.
That's the question. All right. Coming up here on the Hill, is the Wild Wild West making a return? Why some lawmakers want to bring back, you ready? Duels. Yes. And Bill Belichick and politics, don't worry, he's not running for office, at least not that we know of. Ooh. But ahead of one of the biggest weekends in football, we'll pose a question about that man right there that might get you thinking. The Hill on NewsNation, back in a few.
Play and Alexa.
Hi, I'm Dr. Kathleen Eubanks-Ming with the American Academy of Family Physicians. Bullies use power, strength, or popularity to hurt others emotionally or physically. And while you can't be with your child all the time, there are ways you can help. If your child encounters a bully, tell them to get to a safe place and tell an adult. You can also show them how to block online bullies. Teach them they can be more than a bystander and that they can help their peers. For more on bullying, visit FamilyDoctor.org or talk with your family physician.
Meet Keith, loving dad, board game champ, bus driving pro.
I drive 65,000 miles in my bus each year. If people knew what I know, lives could be saved. Like how there are some things I simply can't see. On my route the other day, a car tried to sneak past me and ends up right in my blind spot. I turned slowly, so accident avoided. But no car should be in the blind spot for a 40,000-pound bus. It's our roads. It's our safety.
Visit www.sharetheroadsafely.gov.
I need answers to my tax questions. Where can I find them?
Need answers? Try our interactive tax assistant on irs.gov/ITA. Simply select your tax questions, provide your information, and it gives you answers. Also, check our help and resources page and try our online tax map. 5,000 tax topics from A to Z. Plus, you can access forms, publications in a variety of formats.
This is NewsNation. News that's fact-based and reliable. That's why we're America's fastest-growing cable news network.
My mom has taken up going to the park to practice yoga.
My dad's going to a club, but not a book club, a salsa club.
Finding new hobbies comes with age.
My mom has started getting lost and not knowing where she's going.
Becoming lost or disoriented doesn't. Confusion with time or place may be a sign of Alzheimer's. An early diagnosis can help improve the quality of life for your loved one. Learn the warning signs of Alzheimer's at 10signs.org. Brought to you by the Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council.
Pass it on. Today my bank made a big mistake, but I forgave them. My server spilled water on me, but I forgave him. My toddler drew lipstick on the wall. Was I ever mad? It got me thinking. I can forgive my bank and my server, but I'm upset with my own kid? I mean, what's most important here? So, tonight, the two of us are doing lipstick art. On paper. Forgiveness is in you. Pass it on. From PassItOn.com.
Many Americans have missed regular dental care in the past few years. It's important to see a dentist twice a year to identify any problems early. Taking care of your oral health helps overall health. Brushing at least twice a day with fluoride toothpaste and flossing daily can help prevent oral health problems. For more information, visit hrsa.gov/oral-health.
What would we do, baby, without us?
Do you sense a theme here? Your favorite sitcoms from the 80s and 90s are all in one place. Rewind TV. Just go to rewindtv.com and check it out.
Smokey the Bear.
Then you know why Smokey tells you when he sees you passing through. Remember, please be careful. It's the least that you can do.
What you desire, don't play with matches. Don't play with fire.
After 80 years of learning his wildfire prevention tips, Smokey Bear lives within us all. Learn more at SmokeyBear.com. And remember,
only you can prevent wildfires.
Brought to you by the USDA Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
Well, in the Missouri legislature, there is a dispute between the Republican leadership and the Missouri Freedom Caucus, and the tension is leading to an unusual proposed rule to help state politicians settle their differences. A duel at high noon. Quote, if a senator's honor is impugned by another senator to the point that it is beyond repair, such senator may rectify the perceived insult by challenging the offending senator to a duel.
Please tell me it's a gag.
This is like pointing out how crappy things are in politics right now.
So it's a gag.
It's kind of like a gag.
They don't really want to.
They put this forward just to show how wretched things have got. I feel like you've been sitting in the middle of a duel right now.
Yeah,
I used to.
I think I'm just separating this right now. Just keep it.
But the fact that it gets to this just kind of shows where we are, right? Does it not?
Violence has no place in American politics, period. And for that lawmaker to bring that up, it's an assignation that I will not tolerate.
I think sometimes you kind of just need to wean the fat off in politics, and some people need to go away. I don't think you need to do it by duel, but we've done it by duel in the past.
Of course,
the 1850s are what replaced duel.
The most famous one, of course, the Burr-Hamilton duel. Aaron Burr, Alexander Hamilton, high-level duel, 1804. You know the story there. Missouri, they're considering it again as sort of just saying, you know what? We need to move past this kind of stuff. All right. Speaking of looking forward, Super Bowl, the Super Bowl, 2 weeks away. Bud Light, by the way, is using its valuable ad space to kickstart a comeback tour. Bud Light, formerly the best-selling beer in the U.S., has released a teaser clip of its upcoming Super Bowl ad. Watch.
Are you?
I don't know what it's about. I think that might be Peyton Manning. He's been in a commercial for them. Who knows? But Bud Light, of course, lit up social media for months after a sponsorship deal with the transgender influencer Dylan Mulvaney set off boycotts, backlash. This was dividing along political lines. Conservatives like you were none too thrilled about it.
Well, Bud Light dug its own grave. If they actually want to be back and be the king of the market, just go to the Florida-Bama line, put Peyton Manning there, and you'll get right back on top. They were idiots. They bit the hand that fed them.
Come on. They give a six-pack of beer to a social media influencer.
You don't drink beer.
And people lose their shirts over it. I was going to say something else. But it is ridiculous to me how people get all offended by it. Let her live her life. I know conservatism is about not caring how people live their lives.
I'm not blaming Dylan Mulvaney. I'm blaming Bud Light.
You sent this one out, Kelly?
Kelly, you're the demilitarized zone.
I was just going to say, is the Bud Light Budweiser the frog commercial back in the day? I like that. Can we go back to that one?
Until they have the frog and they somehow say it's
So, by the way, speaking of football, it got me thinking Bill Belichick, of course, he's won 6 Super Bowls, right? There's 2 head coaching openings in the NFL right now. Bill Belichick has not gotten a head coaching offer at this point in time, so I wonder, and Mick Mulvaney, come on in, if you could pull someone off the political sidelines and put them in the game, who would you put in the game?
Well, I've got the opposite because there's actually something happening down here in South Carolina that's got a lot of us scratching our heads. So I'm going to do the other side, which is if you saw someone coming in off the sidelines, who would you please say, no, stay on the sidelines? There's rumors coming out of Charleston that Marshall C. Sanford Jr. is talking about making yet another political comeback. That's right. Mark Sanford, the king of the Appalachian Trail, is talking about running again. We're sort of hoping he stays on the sidelines. So I know it's not the exact answer to your question, but sort of in the ballpark.
That's an interesting one. Who do you want off the sidelines?
I'd like to see J.P. Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon put his money where his mouth is. He may be a Democrat, but I want him to step in.
Who do you want off the sidelines?
I'm just going to go back to folks I covered early when I came to D.C., but I was going to say John Boehner would be really interesting.
Oh, Boehner would be interesting.
Marco Wilde.
Kelly Meyer. What about you?
My first campaign, Jerry Brown, 1992. I was 18 years old, but I'm going to say Howard Stern. Hey now to all of our Sirius XM listeners.
I know the correct answer, and I know who it is, and it's Mick Mulvaney. That's
America needed more Mulvaney. Wait. Isn't Budweiser already in trouble because of Mick Mulvaney? I thought that was the whole problem.
Mick, thank you for joining us. Appreciate it. You can respond to that maybe on Monday.
Tuesday morning. I'll see you there.
All right. The rest of you all, fun show. I'll be back other side of the break. Leland Vitter joins me. Stay with us. The Hill returns.
Tonight, a NewsNation exclusive. These 3 men found frozen to death in their friend's backyard. As the mystery deepens, Chris talks with the women who have children with 2 of the victims. Tonight on Cuomo, only on NewsNation.
All right, welcome back here to The Hill on NewsNation. So it's now almost 4 months into the war between Israel and Hamas. And now President Biden is signaling that he might want the war to be over by the end of this year. Axios is reporting that the president told Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu when they spoke last week that he is not in it for another year of war in Gaza. It, of course, comes as new polling shows that the president has some troubles with young voters. Is Israel committing genocide against Palestinian civilians? 49% of those between 18 to 29 say yes, and half of those who voted for President Biden in 2020 feel the same. Joining me now, host of On Balance, Leland Vittert. Leland, I saw that headline. Is it fair to connect that headline to those sort of
I think it's very fair. We've been expecting this, right? Yeah. In talking about what's happening. If only war followed election timelines, it would make presidents' lives a lot easier, right? These 49% are probably the same 49% who thought that Hamas was in the right in the October 7th attacks. You and I talked about that polling a lot. I think what's interesting is that this leaking and this happening in a way makes the war last longer.
The conversation.
The conversation, because it emboldens Hamas to know that Israel's under pressure.
And these two hadn't talked for weeks, President Biden and the Israeli Prime Minister, and to think that when they do get on the